We're talking the recovery this time with Brett Snyder, the Cranky Flier himself. He is the crankiest of flyers. This I can truly attest.
How dare you? I'm in Hawaii mode right
You
now.
are in Hawaiian mode, and
I'm quarantined for 14 days.
This is the 14-day shirt, the 14-day quarantine shirt. And was it also the 1 through 13 quarantine day shirt?
Yeah, I haven't changed it. I did put shorts on today. You should be very proud, though. I can actually stand up and not be embarrassed by myself.
That makes one of us.
It's fair.
Anyway, so we're talking the coronavirus recovery. We've seen, and I think we were talking about this earlier during the week, where talking about the crisis seems to almost kind of be old news now. We've seen the crisis. We've seen how deep it's going to get. The question now is the recovery. How is the recovery going to happen? And I think it's important to preface everything with, we have no idea. We literally have no idea what's going to happen.
I know. I have all the answers. What are you talking about?
That's right. Your head is a crystal ball.
July 14th. Everything's fine. It's not. That's it. Just hold on till then.
Well, there you go, folks. July 14th.
Bye.
Hawaiian announced earlier this week traffic results for March, which I believe are the only airline that actually reported traffic results. Usually we get, if people aren't aware, the TSA is releasing daily numbers of the people who have gone through screening at each of the checkpoints, whether it be domestic or international. These are people who have gone through the TSA checkpoints. These are updated numbers by the day. And we can see how the traffic has fallen, particularly in March. So they started sharing numbers from March 1st. They have gone through, I believe yesterday's are up and available. And in true, just effective and really thoughtful government fashion, they've actually lined up with 2019 for the same day a week of this month last year. So it's a great data set, and we can watch the numbers fall. And as you would expect, starting in March 1st, if you assume that they were 100% of the 2019 numbers, the TSA screenings have fallen off a cliff, and it looks like they hit a few rocks on the way down. They rest now at about 5% of total traffic a year over year.
Yeah, and I have to say that, if you've been listening to Doug Parker talk too much and are starting to get optimistic about things, just go right to TSA, and that'll really help you get back to the mood.
The ability to take the daily numbers from the TSA, of course, we can see that we're down 95% from the first or from 2019 rather. Yet, if you look at March, the numbers are down 64%. That's because only half of March was really effective. We can overlay the same and infer Hawaiian Airlines, who are performing better than the TSA average numbers. That doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of optimism for Hawaiian. I think what it does is it opens the door to some discussion around why Hawaiian. What's the best way to put it? They're not as bad as everybody. They're losing slightly less. Is that a good way to put it?
I mean, you can put it however you want, but my guess is that they were better in the beginning of the month and then tanked hard as soon as the quarantine went into effect. And they're probably worse afterwards. That's my guess. The
other scenario could be true as well, which is that they were already down from traffic to Asia. This I don't know. I'm guessing. So they had a lower point from which to start. So
I imagine Inter-Island wasn't really impacted that much in most of March, right? I mean, they still felt fairly isolated from it all. I don't know. But yeah, Asia, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that probably hurt a lot early on. But it was mostly Japan. I mean, they do very little outside of Japan anymore.
Right. And they did drop a lot of that China flying, right? I think they had tried.
Yeah, they have no China anymore. All they have is Japan and Seoul. That's it in Asia.
The other effect in this would be the inter-island flying, which has a very different demographic, I guess is the word for it. People react differently because it effectively is essential travel in Hawaii.
But there's also, I mean, it's not just Hawaiian either, right? Because you got guys like Mokulele and,
Mhm.
well, you have Southwest, but Makani Kai as well and Molokai.
It illustrates two things. One, these are weird times. These are very weird times to see traffic that low, but also Hawaii is very unique in how it handles passengers. The inter-island travel, the international travel is interesting. Also the leisure. So you have this very inelastic population, citizens of Hawaii, and then you have this very elastic vacation and leisure travel who go to the islands. And
But there's also the cargo piece too, right? So, of course there are ships, but it's not like you can put it on a train or on a truck. So there's going to be more demand for the belly space too, which I know when Hawaiian originally said they were only going to do LA from the mainland, they added San Francisco back in, and I think they said it was largely on cargo. So.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it illustrates two things. One, the importance of cargo to the islands, but also just kind of questioning how important cargo could be everywhere else that's not an international destination. Airplanes are expensive. If belly space is available, it makes sense, but trucks are very cheap. Hawaii, on the other hand, you can't get it there.
It is. I mean, you think about it, right? Because normally you think about all these airplanes that are full of people. Like, well, yeah, we take some cargo. It's nice. It helps us. But at this point, there are no people. There are no bags.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of cargo space, especially on an A330 on a 5-hour flight.
Well, there's a ton of cargo space. That's the benefit of an airline serving the islands. There's a ton of cargo space going into the islands, or there's a ton of cargo available coming into the islands, leaving pineapples.
No, pineapples, they don't actually grow them commercially there anymore.
But the imbalance of cargo to the islands makes it doubly. I mean, it effectively doubles the cost of moving cargo for Hawaiian Airlines because they're only full one way.
So when I was out there and I met with some folks in Hilo and at Lihue, this one I did that day in July last year, mm-hmm. where bounced around all the islands. And so, Hilo, they were saying they have like their big papaya shipments, I think it was twice a week. And in Lihue, they have their big sugarcane or taro and other stuff. And so the more outer island or neighbor island flights that they have to the mainland, they can put some of those perishables on that. Now they don't have that as much. So if you kind of funnel it through Honolulu, then maybe you can fill up the belly on those more. I mean, look, American, they're down to one daily flight until the government makes them do something stupid and add more. It's a 787. There's no way they're filling that with people.
Looking further at the TSA numbers, the question of when people come back is largely going to be answered by how comfortable they are to actually return, at least that in their perspective. So the idea was to find a way to measure sentiment. It's difficult because sentiment doesn't always align with travel numbers. As you would expect, people online may search for, say, a vacation destination 2 to 3 months beforehand. However, now that we've had the change in traffic so drastically as we have, we're able to realign and calibrate some of these analyses, looking for the return of people suddenly through Twitter, through Instagram, through Google searches, looking for things that and searching for things that correlate with travel again.
I feel like sentiment right now lines up pretty well. 0.
Yeah, and it's actually slightly better than 0 because
-100. My apologies.
and so that's what this chart is. We've overlined this factored sentiment. So this is a grouping of weighted and correlated sentiment searches, Twitter posts, what have you. It's the collective internet looking and being interested in these type of searches that correlate with travel. And as you can see, I mean, it correlates almost perfectly. What's interesting is that at the end, even though traffic is down 95%, there seems to be a different floor for sentiment, which basically I think are the negative searches. Instead of people on Twitter saying, where would I like to travel? It's people saying, why can't I travel?
I don't know. I mean, the people who are flying, so you're gathering this from a bunch of different social media mentions and things like that.
Correct. It's something that we're testing, and what we're waiting for is actually that spike up. So when people start looking for, and it should lead a recovery. So while we've seen it trend very well, some of them leading, some of them lagging, it's all combined into this index. Before people step foot on airplanes again, we should start seeing an increase in people looking for hotels, people talking about traveling.
No, but I think that's true. I mean, so in Cranky Concierge, right? I mean, we've been watching this. We saw things happening a lot earlier than restaurants or whatever it was, because people started looking further out and saying, oh yeah, no, this is getting worse, I'm not going to go somewhere. And then as soon as people start thinking about booking again, then great. I mean, we've had a trickle of people that are planning trips into end of this year, early next year, that are thinking about this already. That's great. Every time one comes in, we celebrate. But but there's still so much uncertainty. And I guess, I mean, that's why the airlines have done things like, waiving change fees for new purchases, no matter how far out, things like that. Take down any barrier that would prevent someone from actually booking a plane ticket. But then, they go and do stupid stuff like refusing refunds. And that's the stuff that gets the huge news coverage. Any goodwill gets wiped out because people see all these horrible things that are being done. And then they don't want to buy a plane ticket because they're afraid they're going to lose their money. No, within 90 days, I don't think you're seeing any bookings. I mean, certainly through May, I think there's almost nothing except for essential workers. But when you start getting into June, that's when you start thinking, okay, summer vacation time, so are people really going to do it? And I think if people are already booked, that's one thing. But I can't imagine that someone who's looking at a summer vacation with the kids is thinking, let's book it in June right now. They're probably thinking, let's book it July, August, further out, and hope that we can take it, if they're booking at all.
If they're booking at all. And I think that gets to the question around the booking curves. What are the booking curves going to look like? I mean, that's all thrown out. I mean, all of these poor revenue management guys trying to write algorithms around how demand is moving. It's impossible right now because there is no demand. You're dividing by zero. You're opening black holes.
So you're trying to get sympathy for the RM guys. This is, as a former pricer, I support.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got a few cookies on my computer and they know when I'm searching, so it may give me a lower price.
I think a lot of this depends on the recovery and how it goes. And we had talked about this before. For me, I think the worst case scenario for any kind of booking curve integrity here is if there's a second wave. Things start to get better. Then there's a second wave. And then people say, oh, God. But yeah, so the point is like, all right, this is a one-off thing. Things are improving. I'm going to book again. Great. Then the second wave comes like, oh, come on. And then people, I think, stop booking further out.
I think you're right.
It can be a third wave, a fourth wave. This is terrible. I mean, I think we'll probably see some booking curve compression anyway, obviously, just because maybe people will be able to travel this summer, but they're certainly not going to book much of it now. But if you have these ups and downs until we have a vaccine or a cure or whatever, then yeah, I have to think that people will not book in advance at all. And then this gets to the other problem. At that point, if everybody's booking last minute, then how do you put fences on to get low fares to leisure travelers, and business travelers keep them higher fares? Like, good luck if everyone's just booking at the last minute. I mean, you're basically a dead industry. Maybe it's not dead in the truest sense that it is right now, where demand's down 97%, but you're nowhere near a point of becoming healthy again until you can find a way to kind of reestablish some sort of integrity in your pricing systems.
I don't think you can segment, at least until 21 at the earliest. I mean, good luck. Maybe there are some different ways to do it, but so hypothetically, let's say that June 1st, Fauci, who's kind of the only one credibly enough to come out and say this, okay, it's over. Everybody enjoy yourselves. Have a good summer.
No, it's July 14th.
Okay, so let's say he does it July 14th. You're right. Yeah, because that is the day that he would do that. It is July 14th. Correct. Everybody enjoy your summer. Fauci said so. No reason to be afraid. The flights on July 15th are going to be pretty full. The flights on August 1st are going to be pretty full. Granted, we're talking about lower capacity, but it seems like there'd be at that point, at that whatever that all clear is and all clear looks like, it seems like there'd be a rush to book. But to your other point, I think this is really interesting as well. If the industry were down 50%, we would call it dead. Like we would use the term, man, it's dead. That's like 45% north of where we are right now.
Oh yeah.
So growth is just to where it's dead.
Yes, correct. That would be an amazing situation to be in right now.
It would be.
Demand.
50% sounds great.
But I don't know. So to me, the summer is not really a concern because in my mind, in the summer anyway, business travel's down. You have a lot more leisure. You can still usually maintain prices just because pricing or demand is so high during the summer for leisure. So the booking curve collapse wouldn't really be that big of an issue. I think, you don't really need to segment. It's more once you get into September and beyond, then there's much more of a split between business travel and leisure. And you want to try and get people on the plane with cheap fares, but you have substantial business travel that you need to try and protect the fare that they're paying. That's where I think you run into a lot of trouble. And I imagine during those times, unless schools are closed again, in which case nobody's traveling, it's going to be harder for people to take discretionary trips. So it really has to be price led. If people are going to be confident to travel again, it needs to be price led for people that have that ability to go somewhere to fill those seats. So how do you do that and protect it from the business traveler, or segregate it from the business traveler that needs to pay a higher fare, because that's how the world goes around, the way that the airlines have put it all together. Now, I don't think you can, because everyone's just looking last minute.
Maybe you do the opposite. I mean, I think what we're assuming is that you segment out the business traveler from the low fares that you're offering for the leisure traveler. What if you just don't offer those? What if you don't expect any of them to be there? I think we were having this conversation a few days ago where the idea was, with low flights, so a lot of supply with not a lot of demand, you would expect prices to drop. But yet the people who are flying right now really, really have to fly.
Oh yeah, through May 31st, or through Memorial Day. Pick your random date.
July 14th.
Well. Of course. But yeah, through then, I mean, there's no one flying that shouldn't be flying. And if there are people that are doing it because they found a cheap fare, then they shouldn't be flying. So, between now and then, I don't understand these discounted fares. I think this is really weird, the airlines that have put out discounts. Out of LA, when I was doing this for a post, I was looking at it. United had a 28-day advance purchase with a $1 base fare, LA to London. With all the fees and stuff, it ended up being like $350. Still, $1 base fare.
$1. But so I saw that as well. Actually, and in fact, I did get that because it was United that came out with it was like $710, which would be that $350.
No, this was $350 round trip.
Oh my goodness. I'd have walked to LA for that. The moral of the story is it's no longer there. It's right back up to $1,400 with empty seats, because the idea is if you can go, especially internationally, if you can go, we're going to charge you for it. And maybe that's the way you segment.
That should be the way you do it now. I mean, that seems obvious to me. I swear, we were poking around at a bunch of airlines trying to find some lower fares, and American had a lot of cheap ones domestically. Southwest looked like it was pretty much doing distance-based pricing. Here's some placeholders to keep us busy for a while. It's not that they were overly expensive, but they were just kind of normal Southwest fares. And that seems like the right way to do it to me in the short term.
It makes sense.
You don't want to gouge. You don't want to.
But you don't want to stimulate either.
You don't want to stimulate either, right? And it's unclear how much stimulation could actually occur anyway. There's going to be way more dilution, I would assume. So that is up until July 14th. then you've got the summer where I think, if things continue to improve the way they've been improving, then to me the summer seems like a time of, all right, let's just fill our planes. Let's get people traveling. Let's do what we can. Probably easier domestically. I think international is going to be a really tough sell for a lot longer, just because of concerns about what other countries are going to do with restrictions. And, if I go, can I get home?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? So domestic, I think, has a better chance. And of course, the best of all is if you're visiting friends and relatives, right? Because then you don't have to worry about a hotel being open or a theme park or anything. It's just, you're just going to see family. So that's the least risk for anyone, is to book something like that. But I think for the summer, it should be about, assuming it's safe, it should be about fill those airplanes, make the fares cheap, get people going, try and just get things moving again. But it's the fall when it starts to get tough. There aren't many leisure travelers. There are a lot of business travelers. Do you protect the business traveler fares? Just go with a lot of empty seats? Or do you just go lowest common denominator and just fill the seats? And there are other things too that we don't know. Are there going to be some mandates coming out about keeping middle seats empty and everything like that? In the short term, that's a dream to think you could fill both an aisle and a window seat. But in the long term, that significantly hurts your capacity if that stays too long. So I think the fall is where it starts getting really murky. And then if the second wave comes, then just.
So what's interesting about the fall too is, you're right, it's heavy business travel, but it's also peak season for conferences for that business community. I wouldn't even be able to hazard to guess what percentage that amount of travel is for conferences versus, or for large gatherings, really, for large business gatherings versus just regular sales stuff. But I mean, that's going to be challenged as well, because now you have, a liability effect for these companies saying, well, look, discretionary travel and expenses aside, just reducing the travel budget during an economically challenged time, I don't want my people to go out and get sick.
I can't imagine big conferences being held this year.
I can't either.
I know there are ones that are still out there, but it doesn't seem possible. I think Facebook said they're going to suspend everything until next summer for in-person conferences. I think business travel can, in theory, come back, meetings, but a big conference, that's just like sporting events.
Yeah, nobody's traveling to sports events. Nobody's traveling to the conferences, which will pick up in the fall or re-pick up in the fall. The difference, and why I still wonder about the conferences, is if there's no order, and if it is slightly vague on whether or not they can have conferences, there are a lot of little companies that are struggling for survival who may try to give it a shot, as opposed to, the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, where they can just kind of control a lot of conferences or games.
It's all about the buyers actually being at this conference. So take the Boyd conference,
which is the 1st of September.
I don't remember. It's end of August, early September.
Okay.
Wherever it is. But the point is, you get these consultants and vendors and whatever that want to go to this and they want to sell to airlines. Are the airlines going to send people to this? Because and maybe airlines are not the best example when you're talking about this, but these little guys that need to grow their business and do things like this, they'll probably go if the right people are there. The problem is that the buyer is going to show up. They can, survive on their own. Well, not the airlines. They can't survive on their own, as we have learned time and time again. But to me, that's what drives it. Is if the people if there's someone to sell to at these conferences, then people will show up. I just don't know that the people who are buying are going to show up at these things.
So I get, speaking of the airlines and how they're dealing. I think one of the interesting things, and this is something that you see very closely and intimately, is how the airlines are riding the wave downs with refunds. In a post, I think it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, you put together just this analytical masterpiece.
Oh yeah. I spent a lot of time on that. There's some pretty sophisticated software that I had to purchase for this.
So walk me through what you're seeing on the refunds and the inspiration for this piece of art.
Well, things have changed a little bit since the Department of Transportation has now slapped down everyone who's not giving any refunds. But what we were seeing is, of course, airlines don't want to give your money back. They have no money coming in. They don't want to just see the bank balance dropping more every day. So they're trying to get creative. And the one that tried to get the most creative was United, because I think United clearly saw the severity of this first, in the US at least, and tried to react as quickly as humanly possible to do things. So part of that was,
in fairness, whether or not they saw it is irrelevant. They admitted it first. I think Scott and Oscar at the JP Morgan conference, it was the first kind of hint of something serious.
Yeah. And I think, for a while there was this talk of, well, will it be worse than 9/11? And now it's like, if only it were that good. But so I think, what they did is they said, all right, how do we stem this tide of money flowing out? And so they started the first of like 38 schedule change policy revisions. It was ridiculous how fast it changed, and it really drove me up the wall. But the first change they made was they said, okay, it used to be if there's a schedule change of more than 2 hours, you could get a refund. That was their policy. And then they changed it to say, no, it has to be 25 hours to get a refund. So, you could have had a flight on one day. As long as they can get you there by the same time the next day, then you can't get a refund. And of course, they did let you make a change without penalty. So it's not like they were saying, fair rules apply. You have no choice in the matter. It was, you just can't get your money back. But in reality, that's pretty unreasonable. I mean, let's say you had a day trip planned somewhere. And so they ended up changing it to 6 hours. And then they ended up, I think briefly they were refunding over 6 hours. And then they went and changed it again and said, okay, you can only get a refund if the change is over 6 hours at the end of the ticket validity period. So you had to wait for a year from date of purchase before.
Oh my goodness.
So this naturally got covered in the press much more than the airlines who were doing the right thing and saying, oh, we can't provide a service. Here's your money back.
Here's your money back, yeah.
And so, everyone got scared. And so I think, this does a lot of harm, not just to United, but to the industry in general. But now they've settled at this point where you can get a refund over 6 hours. They've only settled at that point because DOT told them prompt refunds are required by law, so do it. So they did. But the one thing that DOT doesn't define is what counts as significant change. And so Delta's at 90 minutes. American was at 1 hour. They just made a change to change it to 4 hours, but that's only for newly purchased tickets. So at least they're going about it the right way. United is still sitting at 6 hours. What is a significant delay?
Mm-hmm.
What counts here? And DOT kind of says that it's case by case and all this kind of stuff. So, for now, these policies are all intact, but it's unclear if at some point DOT is going to change what they define as significant. I really think that they should get more complex with these policies. I know American was trying, 1 hour was very generous for American. But to me, it seems like international 4 hours seems perfectly legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
But domestically, that's a much harder sell. What if I had a day trip and my flight's now delayed 4 hours and I can't do a day trip anymore? I know I keep going back to the day trip because that's the polar opposite here, but the shorter the haul, the more the time change really matters. So who knows? My guess is what will happen is people will file complaints with DOT and then it will end up ruling on them. And point of this chart is that either by not refunding or by saying it has to change at least 6 hours, you end up keeping more money in the company. But now you're just growing this liability. You have huge credits that need to be used. And so that means that when people start traveling again, they're not actually buying tickets. They're not giving you new money. They're just using their credits up. So you're preventing more money going out. You're flattening the curve is what you're doing here. You're preventing more money going out, but then when the recovery starts, then you're not going to be bringing in as much money as others who don't have as many credits outstanding. And airlines have done something about this. Delta has extended its ticket validity to the end of September 2022. So, you're making it so that people have more time to be able to use their credits, which will help spread that out. If it were me, and I'm obviously not running an airline, but if I were running an airline, first I'd jump off a cliff. Then
on the way down.
On the way down. So what I think I would do is say, look, I don't care how much money we're keeping in the company. We're screwed. There's zero demand right now. We are going bankrupt without government support.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of when. And I understand the need to try and maintain cash levels, but with something this severe, there's no surviving this for a long period of time without government support and probably creditor support and all that too once you get down the line. But I would say let's do the right thing by the customer.
Well, so on the refunds, it makes sense that on day one, this was a huge problem for them. A lot of cash was going back out the door. We were hearing net negative bookings and revenues. As we get further into this, there has to be much less just because they've dealt with the tickets that would have flown at the time, and they're not getting the new bookings for the future tickets.
I mean, look, the further away you get from the event, yes, because it means people will have had to book further in advance before it happens. But the problem is, I mean, think about June. June hasn't really been pulled down yet, right? So you still have a lot of stuff on the books. As soon as you start canceling all these flights,
you're moving everybody around.
You got to do it again. Now, the idea, hopefully, is that April was a lot more full than June was because people stopped booking closer to departure date. But it's summer, and so summer will have more leisure, further out booking curve. So, I think you're going to have an issue into the summer for this. And I think, this is why United, they again got pretty smart in some of their policies here, but they said, hey, look, guess what? You're flying anytime between now and the end of the year. We'll waive the change fee. Do whatever you want. Put it into a voucher now, but you have to decide before the end of April. So the point is, you make that decision to go into a voucher, then my refund risk is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have your money. You can use it in the future. I'm not trying to give you nothing for it, but I'm trying to have you make the decision before we cancel your flight and you can get your money back.
Yeah, that money is worth way more to United right now than it will be a year from now.
Well, right. Which the thing in my mind, which I think is so strange though, is I think the airlines that are really smart about this have said, okay, keep your credit with us and we'll give you a bonus. An airline that says, tell you what, we'll give you a bonus if you keep credit with us. Now I'm thinking differently about this. Now I'm really saying, all right, maybe I should be looking at this differently.
It's a loan. It becomes a bunch of micro loans with interest.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it just seems like the pain is coming. We need government support no matter what. Either just, make it an avalanche now and deal with it later. I don't know. Easy for me to say. I don't have an airline with thousands of jobs in it. Even the stimulus that's going to the airlines, it's supposed to be going to the pocket of the worker.
Yeah.
The point is, this is supposed to be keeping the economy afloat by keeping people employed and getting them money. And the refund policy is doing the opposite of that because it's basically saying, oh, you need that $1,000 that you spent on tickets? Too bad. Here's a credit.
It's mine now.
Yeah. And I know, their argument is, well, but it supports all the jobs that are yeah, okay, fine. But you know what? People bought a service and they didn't get it, and that money should go back to them. And so I understand how the public opinion gets formed on these types of things because people also focus on the negative. I mean, I had mentioned, right, American has done a good job with this. They offered that bonus to try and have people keep their credits, but they also, didn't try and play games and fight when you were allowed to refund. And when they did make a change to their policy, they only made it for new purchases. And it's all above board on that sense. No one's going to cover American in great detail, but United is getting dragged all over the media, and American suffers too from that because people just generally lump it together as airlines. And I'm not trying to single American out specifically as doing well. I mean, Delta's done well. Southwest has done well.